We're officially at 10 o'clock on the dot, which means it is time to dive in to today's webinar. I am so excited to have you all here with me and with Nancy Buffington. Nancy is an incredible storyteller in her own right, and more than anything, she's a woman who is making waves and change in the world for other women, which is why I was so honored to invite her on here today. We've got 110 people from around the world who said, yes, I want to learn this skill set today. That was just last time I checked. The registration kept growing and growing. And so I'm so excited to have you all here with us. Now, if you get a moment today, go ahead and chime in the chat panel. Let us know where you're chiming in from. We're curious to hear, where everyone is. I'm seeing Idaho, Seattle, North Carolina, Portugal, some more folks from Idaho. We've got a good Idaho contingent here, so that's amazing. So with that being said, I just want to go ahead and turn the keys to the kingdom over to Miss Nancy to tell us all about why we're here to own your story and own your value.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Madeline. And thank you for tuning in, everybody from around the world and from around Idaho. I'm here in beautiful downtown Boise, looking at the Capitol out my window. It's a beautiful day, and let's just all celebrate that we're here and we're doing business and we're sharing our stories. So let's make the most of this Friday the 13th. How about that? Make it a really lucky one for all of us. I want to give you just a quick sense of where I'm coming from. I own my own business, but I also am part of Next Level Women Leaders, and that's a training company that offers immersive 2-day professional trainings for women who really want to level up their skills. And we start from the inside out. We get very clear, down and dirty about your values, what's really, really important to you as a human being and as a professional. And then we work from there to help you share those values in terms of the stories you tell, the professional stories you tell online, in the real world, in public speaking. And we help you get attuned to your body and get comfortable being in front of people and kind of really being out there. And then we help you figure out how to dress that amazing self that you have with personal style. So it's a really inside out complete approach. We love it. And we've got a couple trainings up coming up that we'll tell you about in a little while. So really glad to be here with Madeline and Next Level Women Leaders. Okay, I want to just give you a sense of, I'll probably, if I remember to, every once in a while say, hey, do you have any questions? Feel free to chat, to post in the chat anytime, and Madeline will take care of you. And if any of you have a question that she thinks is like, this is a burning, time-sensitive question, she'll just chime in, right? And other than that, there will absolutely be time for questions at the end. So we'll make sure to do that and make sure that you get all your questions asked that you can think of at the time. Feel free to follow up with me later and we can do more of that. Okay, I'm just gonna give you a quick preview of what we have going on in the next hour, hour and a half. And that is really first a sense of why do we tell stories? And what happens in our brains when we tell stories, why stories really are the thing to do, why they actually work from a science perspective. And then I'm going to give you some examples of how stories increase value, because that's what we're really talking about today, is the connection between the stories we tell and the value that gives an object or a person, and in this case today, yourself. If you talk about yourself as an individual and a professional, how that really increases your value when you own that story. And then I'm gonna give you a couple points on strategy, how I create stories and how I help my clients and women at Next Level create stories. I'll give you some, I hope, fun examples that I think are pretty amusing that will give you a real starting point. And we'll work on step-by-step how to create that story and how to then place it in a longer message also. So sometimes you may have a very short story that you just lay out there and it speaks for itself. Sometimes you want to layer a story into a longer message. So I'll give you some tips on how to do that. So sound good to everybody? Let's do it. Okay. All right. Uh-oh. It's not going to let me go forward, Madeline.
Let's see.
There we go. Okay. All right.
Let's get that out of the way.
Okay, I want to just give you a sense of what you probably already know, but let's just start by getting ourselves on the same page. Why do we tell stories? And feel free to chime in, and Madeline can check and see the great stuff that you're saying. In general, we tell stories because we're wired to tell stories. Human beings are born storytellers. That's how we evolved. right? By telling stories about the past, by telling ourselves and others stories about what's happening right now, and being able to then think about and predict what may happen in the future based on stories. And that's what sets us apart from every other, species on the planet, of course. It's very likely that we have language in order to tell stories. That's where it all came from, right? So we're really wired to do it. And when we tell stories, we really connect with people. It's a way, you can see in this photo, of you really, really bond, you go deep, you get vulnerable, and you get a sense of who you are, who the other person is, on a really deep emotional level that can't be really replaced by any kind of logical analytical approach. So that's really important. The other piece, we tell stories to inspire each other, to motivate each other, etc. But the other piece is that we remember stories. We're wired as human beings to remember stories. We process them in a different way. And when we remember those stories, we are more apt to then share that story with somebody else. So if you think about, as a business person, as a professional, if you're sharing a story about yourself as a professional and the value that you can add to the world and the people you work with, that story is going to resonate with your audience in a really deep, holistic, personal way. They're going to go share it. And there's nothing better than having other people tell your stories for you, because that's even more credible, more powerful. So we absorb, we remember, and we share stories. What was the last time you saw it could even be beautiful, a PowerPoint slide with tons of bullet points and bar charts, bar graphs and everything? Did you really absorb those statistics? And did you really go and share those with people? Unless that feels really, really compelling to you, you're probably not going to. And so that's why we're doing this here. Okay, I want to give you a sense of what that means in the brain. What's actually going on that makes stories work in this way for us as a species? And it really has to do with the whole brain. When you're telling a story, think about it this way. When you're telling a story, you are re-experiencing that memory, that client, that project, that, your dog. You're re-experiencing, and you remember sights, you remember sounds, smells, the feeling of maybe, wind on your skin, all those things. And if you are able to share those in that kind of detail with your audience, they actually have the same experience you're having at the moment that they're experiencing that story. So in other words, if you, for example, are in a room with people, if we're lucky enough right now to be in a room with other people, and they do an fMRI, a functional MRI on the speaker's brain, and they have the whole poor audience wired up to the same kind of thing, what they have actually found in the brain is a synchronization of all of the audience members' brains with the speaker's brain. And you can see, again, that the different parts of the brain light up because you're engaging not merely the logical, analytical sense, but all those our memories and our sense of smell and taste, all those things. So it really is a whole experience that we're having, and that's why it encodes so deeply. We experience emotions with that, and we've learned that emotions really are stored in the brain more powerfully, and then we can feel compelled to share those. There was a really interesting radio, I think it was on the Pioneers, I heard a couple months ago, and it was just a little excerpt of a talk of a scientist who started, and he said, let me tell you, let's just talk about a lemon. Imagine that I have a lemon in my hands right here. And he didn't, it was an imaginary lemon. Imagine that I have a lemon in my hands, or you have a lemon in your hand, and you're going to take a knife and you're going to slice that lemon, and look at the puckering of the skin on that lemon, the shiny surface. And then when you slice the lemon, you can feel that, and you can smell the essence of the lemon juice coming at you. It may even squirt a little bit. And then you put that lemon in front of your nose and you deeply inhale. And what he said was, he paused there and he said to the audience, all of your chemistry in your body, hormones, chemicals in your body, just changed as a result of imagining that lemon along with me. And that's a measurable thing. And in fact, that may have happened to you. If any of you had the little salivary gland thing happen.
I felt it. I like closed my eyes and I had the smell. I had it all. I just felt it fully. It was amazing.
So just inhale that lemon, and our brains really don't know the difference. That's the power of story, because we're able to evoke all those different senses and that tangible memory that we have, but it's going to connect to very concrete memories in your audience. So we all have the same experience. It's kind of magical if you think about it that way. So that's what the brain is doing in that way. The other piece of that is that because we are having a whole brain experience, really, we are more likely to turn off the more judgmental, analytical, arms crossed, you better convince me kind of piece. And our bodies and our minds and our hearts kind of relax into the story that you're telling. And whether it's for good or for evil, it's a very powerful thing, because you can get people to listen, to soften, to accept and absorb your message in a way that they would have been maybe rebelling against and really resisting. So it is powerful, and I would just implore you to use that for the powers of good and not evil, because it affects us in a whole lot of ways. Okay, so that's a little bit about the science. The other thing that's really important, that's what we're really talking about here, is because it's so powerful and because we're wired to do this and because it's a whole brain, whole body experience, that adds up to value. And that's what we're talking about, right? So if we can get to the point where we can tell stories about ourselves, about the work that we do, about the company that we do, about the people we touch, that's going to affect people in a much more profound, memorable way that, again, they share. And there is pretty much, I would say, nothing more valuable than a story well told that you believe in. And I'll give you a couple examples of that in a minute. But that's why we're here today, because if this, hang in there with me, right? If stories are so powerful and we learn to tell them really well, that increases our value. Absolutely. Madeline, do we have any questions yet before I plunge ahead?
We had a comment here that I just loved come through, and it was from Sarah Weintraub. And Sarah shared with us, when you were talking about early on, like, what is the power of story, and why does storytelling really matter? And you were sharing with us, and Sarah shared, and storytelling is about our desire to connect through shared experiences, and you just gave us so many beautiful examples of that. That could be truly a physical experience, or it could be an emotional experience, but really it's about this way that we create connection, and I just loved that share. It was great.
I love that. Thank you, Sarah. Where is Sarah again?
Great question. Sarah, where are you? Let's see if she wrote in earlier. Where in the world is Sarah today? Oh, there she is. She's in Idaho, Meridian, Idaho.
Oh, hey, Sarah. I can almost wave to you. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's really important. And thanks for kind of underlining that. And how I feel, I'll take a small tangent, which is, when I coach people to do any kind of presentation, any kind of talk, what I tell them is that what audiences, especially these days, want, it's not perfection. They don't want something that is so slick that they kind of suspect, like, did you actually create that? Or how many times did you work on that? Where you feel robotic and automatic. We can get that anywhere, and we just kind of don't trust it anymore, right? Yeah. So what we want instead, what people crave, is connection more and more these days. So I love that you tapped into that, Sarah, because the stories is one of the places where you go just instantly to that connection, which is what we all really want. And once you connect with somebody, that relationship is made and solid, and you can do amazing things together, right? Without that connection, there's not a whole lot you can do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So thanks for that. I'll give you just a quick example, a little bit of a story about some clients that I worked with, to give you a sense of what storytelling did for them. It's a nonprofit in town, and they do amazing work. I'm not going to identify them, though they probably wouldn't care. They do amazing work. And I've worked with them for 4 years now. And what I do is I come in when they're getting ready for their fundraiser, their annual gala. And all I do is I work with the women and children, and sometimes the men, who are going to be speaking at their fundraisers. And these are people who've been helped by the program. And they had done it before, but they didn't really know quite how to tell a story, right? They weren't quite sure. And so they brought me in starting a few years ago. And the executive director, she's a very intense, very worried person. Getting ready for the fundraiser for everyone is just like managing her stress usually. And she's very upfront about that. Just like, keep me happy, don't let me panic, and everything will be good. And when I met with her the first time, her nerves were very clear. She's, fiddling with her hair, she's biting her nails, she's got this furrow in her brow. And she said, okay, so I need you to work with these people on stories. And can you give me tips for when I'm standing on that stage asking for money and we don't make our goal because we've never made our goal? How do I fill the time? Right? What do I do and how do I not feel awkward and just terrible because we've never made our goal? And I said, like, okay, let's not worry about it. I coached her on that piece too. But basically that year, I just worked with 2 of their speakers. And what happened then, they gave these amazing kind of tear-jerking, of course, stories, very beautiful. These were not professional speakers. These were stories that they created themselves and shared, right? And so the executive director gets on stage after they give their stories. And I don't know if you've seen those fundraisers where they have that thing that looks like a thermometer and, people text in their donation and you watch it go up. 5 minutes in, they had surpassed their annual goal, which at that point was $28,000. And so she didn't have to fill the time at all. In fact, they went up over, I think 40% over their annual goal that time. And where they stand now, this is the 4th year. So when I started again, they had never made $28,000. And now I think their annual goal is 120. And last year they made, I think, 30% more than their annual goal, again, in 5 minutes. Maybe it was 7 minutes. And so imagine the amount of people that they have been able to serve and help is so much more in the Boise area, just really because of the stories that these incredible people tell year after year. So
I'm just blown away by this story. And I think it's so important because so many of us get uncomfortable with this idea of even asking people. And there's so much about just sharing a story that shifts our brains, kind of like you were talking about earlier, shifts our brains from this mode of, oh my gosh, I've got to ask people, to I just have to share my value or share my experience with others. And if they're compelled by it, they want to come on board. They want to invest or donate or do those things. And I think that's such an important shift, particularly for the women in the room who are, maybe struggling or getting are a little uncomfortable with asking for people to share that value. And I know we're going to go a lot deeper down this path, but I just think that's such an important shift of, sharing versus asking, and how that shifts the way that people come on board.
Absolutely. And the most amazing thing that I feel it does, especially for women, or if there are any men on the call, you're on the call because you feel the same, like, I want to be able to tell my story and it's hard for me to do it. It helps us get over that psychological resistance to, let me just advertise myself and let me ask you for things and do a cold call and, ruin your day again, right? I feel a lot of guilt about that. But if I can start telling stories about people I've worked with, I'm so excited about that because I loved helping them. And then I don't feel guilty. I don't feel fake. I don't feel manipulative because I'm just genuinely sharing a story. And it comes across not only in the story that I tell, but of course in all my nonverbals that I'm like excited. And that's the infectious piece. That's where people go, you're real. I feel that you're really into it. The connection, right? Yeah. So that's great. Thank you, Madeline. Now I'm going to give you a couple, for me, super interesting examples of stories that have added value. These are not personal stories. So after we go through this piece, then we'll get to your own personal story and how you tell your personal story. But just some more anecdotes about how stories have really impacted value. And this is called the Significant Objects Project. I heard about it a couple years ago and then went back just a week ago to go, what was that again? Because it was astonishing to me. So I wanted to share it with you. And 2 of the founders, Joshua and Rob, you can see this quote here. I'll let you just take a second to read that. Stories are such a powerful driver of emotional value that their effect on any given object's subjective value can actually be measured objectively. So that's pretty cool. I mean, and if that sounds kind of vague and jargony, I'll show you what they mean here. So you can find this online after the webinar if you're interested, because you could spend like a couple good hours today if you get into it. It's just really fascinating to me. What they did was this is a kind of quasi-anthropological study that was done a few years ago. And their hypothesis was, again, that you could take an object that wasn't super great, like, you know, a clock, right? And let's say this clock doesn't even work. Pretty much works. Okay, let's say the clock doesn't even work. I just find it at a thrift store. And then I tell a story about it. In this case, they were fictional stories. So we'll get to the real story in a minute. But tell a fictional story about it that's super compelling. And then put it on eBay and see, with the story, and see what people pay for it. So that was the experiment that they did. And they did it 1 year, and it was really interesting. So they did it for several years in a row. And that's where you could go down the endless rabbit hole today if you want to do that. Great weekend project, actually. So that's what they did. They purchased objects out of garage sales and thrift stores, found people to write a story, and then they put it back on eBay with the object and the story. And the person who was auctioned and the person who won that auction and had the highest bid, like eBay, they got the object and they also got the story. So let's see how that happened. I'm only going to tell you one of these stories because I don't want to take too much time up, but they're all pretty fun. Okay, so this one, the Utah snow globe. And I want you to just kind of take a look at it and imagine, what I'm going to tell you that it was originally purchased for 99 cents. You can ask yourself, would you even pay 99 cents for it? I'm not sure. Would you do that, right? And the penny is there, of course, to give you the sense of the scale. All right, so there's one, and there are stories attached to all of these, but I'm going to just lead to another. Feel free to put in the chat what you would pay for it. And I am going to ask you what you think others paid for it. What did the winner pay for the Utah snow globe? Go ahead and put that in chat. Just guess for now.
We've got $4. I threw out $2.
Okay.
Stacy Annis said $1.99. If my kids really begged me, somebody else said $4.79. Sharon went big and bold, $10.25 as in $1,025.
Oh my
gosh. Winner over $100. Let's see who gets the closest bet. Yeah, we've got a whole range here. So somebody's gonna be right.
Okay.
And Abby Lou said I wouldn't take it for free. She's like me. She's Marie Kondo in her life. She's like, screw these snow globes.
You would want to get rid of it, right, Abby?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to tell you yet. We're going to build up suspense because I'm going to show you objects, and I'm going to tell you a story for one of them in a minute. Okay, so here's our next object. It is the classic bottle. Yes, it's full of Hellmann's Real Mayonnaise. I'm trying to see, I don't see a date, an expiration date. How much would you pay for a full, and it was unopened.
Okay.
Jar of mayonnaise.
Okay, throw in your guesses. I will say that I am a mayonnaise aficionado. This is a fun fact that most people don't know about me, but like I get low-grade anxiety when our house is about to run out of, and this is the only brand I buy. So I would, especially in these times where I'm stocking up at the grocery store, I would pay a pretty penny for this small jar of mayonnaise.
It's going to be on run on mayonnaise. You pay.
Yeah. Oh, somebody said $0. I'll pay for it on my own. Somebody else, I'll pay for you to take it away, Madeline. You can have all the mayonnaise. I will take all the mayonnaise. It's like my favorite condiment. I'm not gonna lie. I love an aioli. Mayo is my thing.
Oh yeah, you're gonna get some mysterious like case of mayo. It just appears on your doorstep in a couple days from one of you, right?
Okay, we've got guesses ranging from $0 all the way up to $250. It looks like.
Okay. Great. Now, did I tell you yet what the snow globe was bought for? Did I say?
No.
So I'll give you the purchase price, but I won't give you the end price until we're done with this experiment. The snow globe was purchased for 99 cents.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
And the jar of mayonnaise, I don't know, Madeline, you're gonna just be freaking out here. It was free.
Yeah, somebody said it looks like one of the ones you get from the hotel, and Sherry chimed in, I wouldn't buy mayo online.
Because it is, keep in mind, look at the penny. This is a small little,
Yeah, this is like the one you get at the hotel on your tray with your burger. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and here's our third one. And this is an old toy car. Original price, drum roll, free. Right? So what would you pay for that?
Hmm.
Anybody?
Maybe 50 cents if my kids begged for it, kind of in that category.
Okay. So get your bids in before, because I'm going to start telling the story. I'm going
We've
to
got
look
a
for.
dollar, we've got $200.
Okay, this is great. I love the range. So here is the story, and I'll. It's like 4 paragraphs, but I wanted to read you the whole thing. That's why I didn't read you the others because we'd take too long. And so I'll give you the story, and then if you want to change your bid, feel free to change your bid given the
Mhm.
story, right? Okay. I failed my learner's permit test 3 times. The first time, my father was angry because he'd gotten out of bed at 7:30 on a Saturday morning so we could be first in line when the DMV opened at 8. Still, we had to wait 3 hours. The world is not as simple as you make it out to be, he said, shifting in the uncomfortable plastic bucket seat, his fingers itchy for a newspaper or coffee. It's not just you make a choice and stick to it. His words ran through my head while I took the test. And when my time was up, there were some answers I wanted to go back and change, but I didn't. When I failed, I knew he was right. The second time I took the test, my mother said, "You think you can pull the wool over everyone's eyes, but you can't. I know what you are." We were in the living room, and my little brother, Neil, looked up from the floor where he was rolling his toy cars back and forth on the light green carpet, making ruts that my mother complained about. Sometimes when my parents were fighting, Neil would make his car noises loudly so they would start yelling at him. His face relaxed while they berated him like he was relieved. "Words have meaning," my mother said hotly when I walked out of the test room the third time. I'd stopped trying to figure out what my parents were talking about most of the time, but something about what she said struck me as wrong. Because the more I studied, the less obvious the questions seemed to me. For instance, to avoid last minute moves, you should be looking down the road to where your vehicle will be in A, 5 to 10 seconds, B, 10 to 15 seconds, C, 15 to 20 seconds. Suddenly, it made no sense that distance could be measured in time, or that you could avoid a future that was going to happen to you in only 20 seconds. Even though I'd studied that question and I knew the answer, I could not mark the right box with my stubby golf pencil because I was sure that the answer the DMV wanted was wrong. The fourth time I went to take the test, my brother gave me one of his toy cars for good luck. My dad had bought him the car, telling him it was the same model as the first car he'd ever owned. The car was pink, and my brother had tried to paint it over, but he didn't have the right kind of paint, so the car ended up looking like a school bathroom. I put my car in my pocket, turned off my brain, and took the test. I passed. I made no mistakes at all. By this time, my parents had split up, and my aunt was waiting for me in the waiting area because my mother had started back at her old job selling perfume at the department store. I kept my brother's car all these years, even though the wheels have broken off and gotten lost, and it is so derelict, even my own kids won't play with it. It reminds me that even if you look down the road to catch a glimpse of your future, there's not much you can avoid.
Hmm.
So again, that's a fictional story. It wasn't sold as a real
Yeah.
uh, a real story about the car. But that's what people saw on eBay, the car and the story. So if you want to change your bid, what would you pay for the car and the story?
Hmm. Let's see.
And this
I
car
I
was the
I
original.
would pay $200 for that. I don't know. It would be a fun display piece, especially if I displayed it with this story. But curious to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah.
Before that, we had a few high guesses because people were saying, "Oh, it's probably antique." Stacy said 150. What
Mhm.
else do we got? Hmm. Somebody else said $0 still. Twyla said, "Yeah, but now you're buying the story."
Yeah, I know. Right,
Yeah,
exactly, which is kind of what we do.
story ups the value. So that's what we're here to show.
That's what we
Hmm.
do. Yeah,
$300 from Sarah. Hmm.
that's fascinating. Okay, so drum roll if you want to hear what everything finally sold for. Okay,
Okay.
go back to our little friendly, let me go back. Our snow globe, original price again was 99 cents. The final selling price was $59.
Wow.
It was a strange story, so I didn't want to share it with you. You
Fair
know,
enough.
you can totally find it online. Okay, the mayonnaise. Here you go, Madeline. Original price free. You probably remember. Final price $51.
Wow.
It's like an ounce, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then this might be a little anticlimactic at this point, but the toy car was free, and the final price was $41.
Hmm.
Even though that's a really good story.
And I mean, if we look at the object, it's a dirty car,
It's a dirty
right?
car with basically no wheels.
It's non-functioning.
Right.
But think about that. We went to something that essentially had no value to anyone. We were just throwing it away
Yep.
to something where people not only wanted it, but were willing to pay. 40 bucks is decent money, especially for something that I would have put in the trash.
For sure. Most of us, it would have been, yeah, gone the way of Marie Kondo's boxes, right?
Hmm.
And so that's pretty interesting. I don't remember how many objects they worked with the very first year, but it must have been a bunch because overall, the objects that they purchased the first year, they spent a total of $128.74 on all the objects they purchased that first year. And you can kind of run the numbers if you want. Imagine what they sold those for as a whole group. The whole group of objects that first year was sold on eBay for $3,612.51.
Wow.
So $127.8 to $3,612. I'm not a math person, but some of you already figured out what that is.
We've got some accountants in the room, so they're
It's just
definitely
a lot.
crunching these numbers. Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah, I tried to do a couple calculations and I went, no, that's not right. I'm not doing it right.
I'm here to tell stories.
I'm the story lady, not the numbers lady.
Mm.
So that's pretty profound, right? Again, it was an experiment, and we can't apply it to everything that we do because we want to tell real stories. And one of you was right; they are kind of buying the story, but in a way, that's often what people are buying.
Mm.
Challenge for us, and why you're probably here today, is that we want to tell real stories about who we actually are, and we want people to buy that. But it's hard to do that, right? I'm going to give you just a couple more examples though from retail, not just old funky stuff, from retail, to remind us how powerful stories are. And then we'll go to how to tell your own story. So raise your hand in the little chat box if you remember the J. Peterman Company.
I don't.
Still around.
But let's see who does in chat. Oh, we've got 3 hands raised so far.
Some of you may
4.
remember it from Seinfeld. That's
Oh yeah, Mariah said Seinfeld question mark. We've got 7 hands raised.
Yeah, and the thing is that Seinfeld, I mean, you would think it was a spoof. No, J.P. Peterman Company is a real company, but it was so crazy that Elaine worked for J.P. Peterman Company in Seinfeld, and that was part of one of the subplots for a long time. So you can see on the left side of your screen, the logo it's this, really I wouldn't say down to earth, but
Rugged kind of guy.
it's a Montana guy. What
Yeah.
happened is John, I believe his name was John Peterman, was a baseball player. He bought some old duster coat in Montana and got a bunch of compliments. And then he started telling stories about it. And then he went, I think I could turn this into a business. So that's like the duster there, one of the classic items that they sell. Okay, so I'll just read you again, J. Peterman's thing. And you can look them up online. When I was in college, I would wait every week until I got my J. Peterman catalog in the mail because it was super tasteful. It had these matte pages and all these just artistically drawn renderings of the clothing and stories. And on a college, like working 2 part-time jobs, I actually bought a couple of J. Peterman items, I will say. Not sure I still own them, but it was pretty darn powerful, especially for this English geek. Okay, so here we can start the bidding if you want. This is called, and this is available today, if you want to jump off later and go buy it.
You need to do some online shopping. Now's your chance. Well, after the webinar.
Exactly. And by the way, if you did watch Seinfeld, the puffy shirt that was super important in quite a few episodes was a J. Peterman puffy shirt, but it was a man's shirt. Okay, so this is welcome to the puffy sleeve blouse. And here's the story. And it actually says, we'll say story in all caps. That's how they lead into all their descriptions. Okay, the social network. The Featherstones are short a lady for their garden party. Correspondence has been sent via courier. Your presence is eagerly requested. Socializing the way Heather Furbank or Lily Langtry did wasn't for fun. It was a career, perhaps even sport. Scandals were encouraged in order to add intrigue to one's standing, be it a man or a woman. Of course, affairs had to be among the married. They weren't savages, for God's sake. This blouse adds intrigue to your engagement. Silky Italian cotton, coquettish puff sleeves, figure flattering cut with a demure ruffled waist. Calling cards will be presented for your consideration. And I can just hear Laura Tolley, our fashion expert, out there just laughing and laughing probably. Allow any of us to actually have this puffy sleeve shirt? She can let us know if she's out there. Okay, how much would you spend on this puffy shirt? It is silky Italian cotton.
I'd say a great blouse is, anywhere between 50 and $100. Mariah said 39. Lee wrote in that she's actually been to the J. Peterman store in Chattanooga back in the day.
Whoa, Lee!
Logan said 50. So we've got 65, 59. We've got a range here.
Great. Okay. So we'll go to a man's item so we can see whether or not this works for men in the same way J. Peterman sells men's and women's clothes. And then we'll do the drum roll reveal. Okay. So here we go. Welcome to the 98th floor bush jacket. I don't know what the 98th floor thing is, but here we go. Story. Advantage position. Fully aware that yesterday's dust-up was of his own making, he wasn't looking forward to today's ambush. From his singular viewpoint, he knew he'd have to make a move before things took a turn for the worse. He understood worse. Better to go another round with a Cape Buffalo than with this newly and self-appointed king of the savannah. Good morning, he swang into the room. Pounced, more like. The circle of navy-suited hyenas startled. All heads swiveled. What they saw? 6'2" of finely constructed suede and rugged resolve. The chairman shifted in his seat. A few bared their teeth, or at least that would be his recollection. A surprise attack, here or in the bush, is always the best shot to take. Okay, how much would you spend on the 98th floor bush jacket? Now we know the 98th floor, what that is.
Probably $200 at least. I mean, Mariah said no, $0. It's not her kind of jacket. But what's interesting here too, and I'm such a language person, right? Like the masculinity and the tone of the language and how that shifted as opposed to the feminine language. And for me, I have a very strong masculine inside, and so I'm kind of like, should I wear this jacket? Should I be this jacket? And other people are like, not my jacket, And Logan wrote in $200. I love it. I love this jacket.
Sweet. Yeah. Well, I love that you are attuned to the audience there, and you were attuned to the sense of, okay, is this written for a woman or a man? Because you do want to create stories that really are going to resonate with that particular audience, and you can tell the difference there. Okay, so here's the big reveal. The puffy sleeve blouse retails for $168. And the 98th floor bush jacket, which is a bestseller, they always have it and they sell very well, $795.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a persona right there. Somebody who's walking around in the almost $800 jacket. That's a vibe. I'm not opposed to it.
Exactly. And I could imagine, you would probably even want, maybe J. Peterman even does this, Logan might know, you would probably want like the little text of the story tucked inside your pocket so you could just either pull it out or just sort of know here, right? Yeah, because that's the value of this. I'm sure they're high quality. That's not the question. But, a man dishing out $795 for a jacket. And this is, again, a bestseller. So any questions before we're going to move next to how to tell your story and a real story? So,
I'm curious to see here too if anybody else was surprised by the prices or about the shift between the two stories between the items. So if anybody has any thoughts in the chat, feel free to chime in terms of how you feel. Would you shell out the $795? Logan asked again, what was the price for the shirt? It was $169, right?
Only $168.
Oh, only 168.
You got a deal. Plus shipping, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and Twyla said, I didn't think they would be that much. Logan said, if I had the money and it fit, I'd consider it. Logan's really loving this jacket.
Logan. So what we need to do is we need to write stories about a bunch of like trashy objects, put them on eBay, auction them off, and then we'll buy Logan this jacket. And
Yeah,
then the rest of it will go to Manny's for you. How about that?
that sounds perfect.
Okay. We may have some other needs out there that we decide that we want to take care of too. And it's all about stories again. So Jay Peterman, he started this again in 1987, and the company is going very strong, and they really have not changed the brand. And they have not changed the methodology. It's all been story driven forever. And that's what, 40 years?
Yeah. Wow.
30 years? Again, I'm not going to do math today. It's not my day for math. Okay, so the bottom line here, it is the bottom line, is again, telling your story is one of the most valuable things that you can possibly do. But the great thing is that when you're telling your own story, you are your own resource. You know this story. All you need to do is kind of grab it from your memory, recreate it, and share it, and that is free. Again, that's what is selling all these other objects. It's even easier to create a story that's your own, in a way, because it's already a story, right? It's recognizing it, going into the archive that is, your whole library of stories that's within you, bringing some out, and you will see that transformation in value. It's huge. So that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time doing. It, the rest of this is all about you. And, the point again here, to beat the dead horse again, is that stories add value. And now let's add value to stories that have to do with you. So that's our purpose today. Let's get to this. All right. So a couple things I wanted to say. The stories we're going to start working on now, delving into, are stories about you, obviously. And as we've mentioned before, that's the place that can get kind of uncomfortable and squishy and weird, because I don't want to tell my story, right? But this is the differentiator. Nobody else knows your story until you share it, right? Nobody else knows your story until you share it. You are the only one who can bring it out from the archives and share it. So at least to begin to share that story, you have to be the first storyteller. Probably others will be inspired, they will be motivated, they will remember it, and then they will continue to share it for you. But you're the first one who has to get it out and get it to your first people. And that can feel especially weird for women. I will absolutely acknowledge that, right? We are still acculturated to feeling like we have to take care of other people, sell other people's things and ideas. We promote other people often much more than we promote ourselves. But if we want to really take advantage of this very clear value of the story, we got to get over that. And the amazing and wonderful thing that helps us get over that is that, again, we're talking real stories. We're not talking puffy shirt stories. We're not talking strange toy car stories. We're talking about things that are real and that you're going to feel great about and compelled to share, and you're going to get over your discomfort. I do need to, like there's a little bit of like, you got to push yourself a little bit, but these are about stories you are going to be really excited to share. You want your story to resonate with others. You're not just telling it out into the ether, into a vacuum. You're telling your story to another human being. Remember that slide in the very beginning of the two young women sitting there just really bonding? That's the feeling you're after. And that's what will happen when you're telling a real, vulnerable, transparent story about you and your work. The point again is that you need to believe it for it to work. So that's what we're going to work towards now. Any questions or comments yet?
None yet, but I think this point that you're making is so important, Nancy, about the fact that in order to step in this space, we have to step into a little bit of discomfort. I know that this is something myself I've experienced recently as I've started to share my story a little bit more publicly. And some people on this webinar know it, but a lot of what I do has to do with the fact that I became a mom really, really young. Young at 20, as my friends would say, you were young, but not teen. What is that show? Teen Mom Young is what she would say. But that was something I hid for a long time. And I happened to be on a webinar earlier this week where a woman shared that that was her story too. And that she had had a lot of shame around it. And then I said, wait, hold up a second. Who else shares this story? And we had 15 women on the panel, a third of the room raised their hand. And all of a sudden we carried this totally different level of connection. But that was all something we were keeping quiet and hidden because we felt a little bit of shame and discomfort around sharing it. So it takes stepping out into this uncomfortable space, but suddenly by sharing, people are going to look around and see that we have something in common.
Absolutely. And when you step forward and you share your story, especially something that feels maybe a little bit vulnerable or a lot vulnerable, the amazing thing is that you start to hear other people's stories. Someone has to be the first one to share some of these things. Mm-hmm. And it's so healing, and it forms such a deep connection, even if it's not a story that necessarily is central to the business that you do, but you share perhaps something personal and it makes a personal connection with somebody. That can be an incredible, strong, irreplaceable foundation for a professional relationship because you really get each other and you've been through something together. Mm-hmm. So you do allow others to be able to share their stories and to connect. So thank you. That's a great example. Yeah. Okay, we're going to again tell the story of you. So that's where the rest of this is going to go from here on out. Here are a couple things that I would suggest. The first thing we got to think about is, what story am I going to tell? Right? Okay, she convinced me I have to tell a story. Yeah. But which story? Like some people say, I don't have any stories. Here is where you want to tell stories from, your place of bliss. If anybody remembers Joseph Campbell, he was all about finding your bliss. And here are places like in your library, go to these like areas in your library, these shelves, the shelf of what do you love most about the work that you do? What do you love the most? You want to access the stuff that just gives you so much energy. The things that, again, using the Marie Kondo example, the things that spark joy for you in your life and in your work. Another way to think about that would be, what's your superpower? What gift do you have that just makes you so happy to share and really, really helps and impacts other people? And another way to think about it is, what makes you unique? What makes you unique?
And if you're comfortable, if you want to push yourself outside your comfort zone and share in the chat your answer to any of these questions, I'd love to hear. And if you're more comfortable keeping it to yourself, just make sure you're making notes, or take some little time here to write these questions down. At least if you don't have an answer yet, there's something that we can always come back to or journal about a little bit.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. And you're going to share a link to this webinar afterwards, right?
Yeah, we'll share the recording out with everyone. We're big fans of being able to come back to things over time.
Exactly. So this is not a one-off necessarily. These are actually questions to really kind of reflect on. Although some things may come to you instantly, some things will take a little while. Maybe a dream, maybe you're 3 a.m. or something when you're not dreaming and wish you would be. Okay, so but it's really finding the things that you don't feel guilty about. You go, oh, I just love this. This makes me feel so great. That's going to be one of those books on that shelf, is going to be something that has the story that you just feel so happy to share. So that's really important.
Logan shared in that I love to help women invest in their health and wellness. That's a really powerful one.
Very nice. So you keep looking in there, Logan, and you go, all right, I'm going to find a story that involves me helping women, with their health and wellness. That's what you're really after. You could even push yourself further and go, what do I love most about it? Right? What do I love the very most? And then that's going to start bringing up specific stories for you. Yeah, there was that one woman. There was that one client. Right? Okay, the next piece, going backwards here. Too excited. The next piece is to remember your audience, because ultimately you are creating this to connect with another person and other people, right? So do think a little bit about okay, who do I want to reach? Who am I telling the story to or for or with? What's important to them? What are they trying to accomplish or solve? What are their pain points? What do they need? What are they searching for? That they're just like it's like they're one side of your Velcro. Here's you, and here's them, and you're gonna go, oh, this is the best thing ever when that story comes together, because they actually feel the need for your superpower. And the idea there again is you are helping them. How can you help them? And when we think about telling stories about ourselves, two things I would say that kind of contradict each other. One is that women tend to be more comfortable sharing stories about ourselves when we're helping others, right? And that's good. Just go there. But also, when we think about sharing our stories, we often don't realize that we are helping people. We think, oh, if I share a story, it's just going to be gross and salesy and turn people off. But again, the right story doesn't even have to feel that way to you. The right story is, I love helping people, and let me just share this thing that makes me so happy about somebody I helped. And then your audience is going to put themselves in that mode and go, could you help me too? Because see, I have that problem too, right? And then you've got a beautiful relationship happening. Okay, does that all make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So follow your bliss, and then follow your audience's bliss in the same way, and it's more blissful with two, isn't it? Okay, and then the last piece would be just pay a little bit of attention to the situation. In other words, we don't tell stories in vacuums. So there's like me, and there's you, and we're having this little moment, and yet we're also surrounded by a situation. So stories that I'm telling today are really short and sweet, maybe a little bit goofy, because we're on a webinar and it's Friday and we're all stressed, right? So we want to have this really safe space where we can go, stories, that's wonderful. And you can think about, do I have 30 seconds to tell my story? Do I have 5 minutes? Is it only women I'm telling this story to? Is it kindergartners? Is it veterinarians? So that's a little bit of audience, but it's also, where are you sharing it? How and when are you sharing it? Because the choice of the story, or at least the shape of the story, you want it to be adaptable and flexible based on the specifics of the situation that you're both surrounded by. Madeline, does that make sense too?
It makes total sense. And I think this is one of the things that people really have to pay attention to, particularly as we move into a world that's changing so fast. Historic brands, we had the opportunity to just keep being consistent with the message over time, and that was enough. But in a world that's constantly changing, we have to really be aware that we're shifting that story to be in alignment with that. So Nancy and I were chatting before we got on this webinar about how, my team and I, we've got a content strategy that we've laid out, but obviously the world's story has changed a lot this week in terms of coronavirus. And so instead of putting out the piece of content we were going to on Monday, we've been writing some stories about how do you respond and react and work virtually in this new environment. And so that's the most important thing that I pull through here is just, it's great to have your story. It's great to have it connected to the audience, but we've got to contextualize. And I see people make this mistake sometimes, particularly in social media and when you've scheduled content in advance, that it can come off as disconnected or insensitive if something big happens in the world, especially something sad or negative, and then you're sharing this positive post and people are like, this is obviously not considering the situation that's going on in the world. And so I think it's something that's really important to think about since we're so globally connected now.
Yeah, beautiful. That's a great and unfortunately really timely example, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a couple things these are particular frameworks that I'm going to share with you they're probably similar to other frameworks you may have encountered in terms of sharing and creating stories, but these are things that I developed myself and play a lot with. So I'm really happy to share them with you today. And this piece that I'm just about to go into, we also share at Next Level, but go into a whole lot more depth, for several hours actually creating and sharing stories. And that's really exciting because all the participants get up and share their own stories, and with the rest of the group. And there's a lot of laughter and often a lot of tears and a lot of bonding because they've shared their stories, right? Okay, so this is what I call start with one, or the rule of one. And this is the piece. I'll just stop and say, this is the piece that's how to create your story. And these are the essential elements of a story that, of course, you dress up and build on, but this is what we got right here. Okay, you start with one. You have one point, and you know what that point is. You may or may not actually say that piece in the story, and you're not going to start, it's not an essay, so you don't start with that as your thesis or anything, but the story should actually have a point to it, that if you don't say it explicitly, your audience should be able to fill in the blanks. Sometimes it's even better when they fill in the blanks, so they don't feel like you shoved it down their throats, and so you don't feel like you're shoving it down their throats. But it should not be an ambiguous story that they could interpret in different ways. And it shouldn't have many, many points, because then we're like, wait, what was that story even about? I'm lost. So nice and crisp and clean. And again, I'm talking about the essence of a story. You can always build on these. So one point. Your story should have one main character. And that might be you, but a lot of us are uncomfortable about telling stories where, like, I'm the hero, and it doesn't really always rest that well with audiences to have the storyteller be the hero. You have to be careful about that anyway. So a lot of times we're telling our main character is somebody else. It could be a client, it could be a colleague, doesn't even have to be a person. It could be a fish, right? If you do work around fish. It could be, a molecule. It could be a traffic sign, but that you're personifying it, right? The idea, though, is that the main character is the one that we focus on in the story. We're going to watch them try to do things, and are they going to solve their problem? And we do want to identify with them. So a lot of times we're putting ourselves in the shoes of your main character. So you might think about creating or choosing from your archive, your memory, a main character who has something in common with your audience. And that way your audience is going to align with the whole story. Does that make sense? Okay. So one main character. You're going to have other characters probably in there, but there's one, this is the one that we care about, and we're like, oh, are they going to succeed? What's going to happen to them? Okay. That main character has one problem. In Western culture, stories are all about problems and conflicts, right? So they have a problem. And it could be more than one, but it should really boil down to one. Let's just keep things simple for today, right? One problem. As I said, that's probably a problem that your audience is going to relate to, because then they're super curious to find out what happens and what your role was in helping them through that problem. Then you try to get real specific. Do you remember with the DMV story? We get the details of the chair the dad was sitting in. We get dialogue from the mom and the dad. We get very specific details about that gross pink paint and then the cover-up paint that didn't work. Those are the things that engage the whole brain, right? The vision, the smells, the sights, the sounds, etc. So you want to narrow it down to probably one day eventually. You can say something like this. Things have been crazy for 6 weeks, and my client Anne was having all these troubles with blah, blah, blah. And then one day, so now we can imagine the one day, and it gives you the opportunity to then describe the seat and the angle of light or whatever is going to help us really put ourselves in Anne's position and relive it ourselves. So one day, it doesn't mean that the whole story had to happen in one day, but that you tell it in little episodes, just like a movie. Right.
And it's perfect that you said just like a movie, because we had Sherry comment in. This reminds me of the recent Mr. Rogers film, which, while it was about Mr. Rogers, was actually much more about the writer. And so I think this is people are making these connections and thinking about, what are the great stories that you've seen and compelled? They probably have all of this. They have a clear message, a clear main character, a problem. Maybe it's distilled down to one day. So I love that share. Thank you, Sherry.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for that connection. And right, as you're seeing, a movie does that, right? They go episodes, or here's this lunch that was a really pivotal lunch, so we're going to spend time on that lunch. Then we're going to fast forward 3 months. So it's not like it all has to transpire in one day, but you isolate it to episodes. And then the one moment would be the last piece that I would encourage you to isolate it to. So it's not even, and then that day happened, and then they had a conversation, and there was a fight, and they figured it out. That's not a story. That's a art, like newspaper article. This, we're not really going to be into it, but bring it down to one moment. And then there was this lunch, and I was sitting there right at Red Lobster in the red booth and looking down at my salad, and she said to me with this look in her eyes, and I'm never gonna forget. And you even do the dialogue with the tone of voice, so you're really recreating the experience for yourself and for your audience. So one moment. There can be more than one moment. There can be multiple moments, but this is the level of detail that you want to come down to. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me just give you a couple that kind of we all are likely to know, or you may have been exposed to in the past, to just give you a really quick reference point. If you ever forget this stuff, you can go back to what I'm going to share with you. This one dates me for sure, but it actually seems to have stood the test of time, like all great literature. And so I'll start this one. It's the beginning. I'll just say it. Okay. Let me tell you a story about a man named Jed. Feel free to, like, as soon as you identify this, feel free to say something in chat, right? He's a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. We've got some there, right? So we got already 2 lines. Let me tell you a story. We got a man named Jed. He's a poor mountaineer. He's got
Everyone's going Beverly Hillbillies, Beverly Hillbillies.
How many of you were singing the song, right? Yeah. I'll tell you a story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. One day he went out shooting at some food, and up from the ground came a bubbling crude oil, that is. And what are y'all saying out there? Texas tea, right?
Yeah.
So it's one day, and like one day he goes out shooting at some food, and it's moments up from the ground, right? And that started Beverly Hillbillies every time. So it was repeated, and it has that in its favor. But it's such an iconic, perfect story that probably not many of you out there actually watched the original ones. I think I did, or the very, very first reruns. And we'll know this for our entire lifetimes, probably. If you don't remember that one, it's okay. Think about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song. And it basically does the same thing, right? So these just stick with you. If you ever forget how to tell a story, just go back to like those first verses of those, and you've got it. Okay. Know that you're going to create multiple stories. You have so many stories within you, and you want to share a bunch of them for different purposes and for different audiences. But this is really the bones of that story. It gives you all the essential pieces, and that's really all you have to do. There's one that I tell in Next Level a lot. So if any of you have gone to Next Level, you'll remember it, about the executive director. I'm not going to share it because it's kind of a bummer of a story, but I heard that story 5 years ago in a workshop that I was leading, and a woman had developed this story in the workshop and shared it. And every time I share it, it's been 5 years and I share it often, I re-experience the story, even though I never even witnessed it. And every single time there are women in Next Level who cry. Several of them.
That reminds me that there's this great commercial right now. I think it's from Indeed, and it's a woman, and she's in a boardroom, and they're all standing around the board table, and obviously the executives are up at the front of the room, and they're going, okay, the promotion goes to, and then it's some guy in the room, and you just look at the woman's face, and it says something about this wouldn't be the first time she was passed over, and then her phone notification goes, and it's an Indeed role notice, and then it goes, but it will be the last. And I, as a woman watching that commercial, you watch it and your gut just goes because I've been in those shoes. I've known that story. I've been that character, you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
That's a beautiful example of a couple things. One is saying that stories don't have to be written down. They're coming across in many different kinds of media. So how, you can adapt them. The other important piece is that that story is something they know the audience, many members of the audience either have gone through or can really identify with. And the idea that you had that physical reaction,
Mhm.
that's when you know a story has really landed
Yeah.
and it's going to stick with that person.
Yeah.
And and they chose that main character again who had a particular problem, and one day happened and that one moment happened, and all of us just go, oh, right, we're right there with them. And then we go, indeed, oh my gosh, I got a solution to this, yay, I feel I'm like on it, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that's fantastic. Oh, the other one would be the theme song for the Partridge, no, Brady Bunch,
Mhm.
right? So if you got two, yeah, they got, and one day, that's the day they became the Brady Bunch.
Mhm.
One,
Mhm.
all right. Okay. An optional piece you can add, if it makes sense, is and today. So you fast forward to today, like here's where they are now. A quick version, I would, this is a quick, not a great story, but my first client 8 years ago called me and she was about to lose her job. Really brilliant biologist with a master's degree. She had a fellowship to an environmental organization. She was about to lose her job because she had gone through a divorce, and the personal and professional things going on in her life kind of colluded to close down her throat. And when she started to speak, her throat would actually close. She would have pain and she couldn't get any words out. Instead, she would cry. And she had been told that her fellowship was not going to be extended like they had originally said it would be. So we started working together, and there were a lot of tears, etc. A year goes by. Okay, I'm going to go like, and today, a year goes by. She's doing really well. She gets a big promotion and moves to Colorado. Then the nature of our coaching changed a bit because she had much more confidence, but a different set of issues. Then she got another promotion and is now one of the top people in the National Park Service. And she's on calls coordinating lots of different constituents across the country. The last time we had a phone call, this is the like, and today, last time we had a phone call a couple of years ago, we had to work on how to give apologies because she had gotten so vocal and so blunt that she was starting to, people were saying like, yeah, you always know how she's feeling. And she said like, oops, I think I've come a long way because now I get to work on backtracking from kind of saying a little bit too much. But that's the one day, or the end today, if you want to kind of show the progression of and the progress somebody's gone through. Okay, that's that piece. Then we're going to add some layers. This is the last piece I'm going to share with you before we pass this along to questions. And this is the idea of, okay, you have that nice little nugget of a story. And I would encourage you, the more you do this, the more fluent you'll become in creating stories. So I would actually encourage you to create a story archive for yourself, for your organization, where you don't have to write them all down, but like the episodes of Friends, like the one when Joey blah blah blah, just kind of give yourself little reminders of that. Oh yeah, that one time I met that person at the park and we had that conversation about the dog. That's enough to put that in the archive for you so you can remember it. Okay, so now we're gonna put that little nugget of that one individual story into a larger context for the times where you might need it. There are a lot of times where all you need is your story, but there are times when it's going to be part of a longer talk or longer messaging. And so this is for those moments in case you want to kind of do the advanced storytelling piece. Okay. One way, if you have to really tell people like, okay, this is what I do for a living, but you don't, we often start with our mission statement, or like, my company offers, utilize and compartmentalize, all these like long words that they're not exciting. They're not story words. Let's put it that way. Right. And so a great way to get people just kind of curious is to, instead of saying this is the work that I do or this is my job title, say I spend my days, or something like that. And I'll give you an example. I was working with an African doctor, and she works in a country where there is only one orthopedic pediatric doctor, like her, surgeon. for 100,000 children. And so actually what she ends up doing, I mean, she does some surgeries, but but she does a lot of administrative work too. So she wasn't able to kind of really articulate any excitement about her job. She wasn't able to generate excitement in me about her job, I would say. And she started out by saying, like, I work for the Department of Health and the minister of this and the minister of that. We don't need the job title. So what we came up with instead was the following sentence: I spend my days putting little children's bodies back together. And people in the room went, whoa, right? That stops you in your tracks. And that's literally actually what she does, the bottom line, right? So get us really curious and wanting to hear more. And then that primes us for your story, that nugget of your story that you have just created, right? You can even say, if you want to, let me tell you a story. Or let me give you an example. Or, I'm remembering one particular client or one particular patient. That's where you tell us that story of one that we just went through. Okay. And then people are so interested and they've lived through it with you and they're not judging and they're right. You have their whole brain engaged and they are connected with you and they trust you. And then you widen your lens and you can say, but that one story of that one patient, and how I stitched that little boy back together after a car accident. See, the thing is, that happens every day. And in fact, there are 100,000 children in the community that need to be served. And so I'm only one surgeon of many. This is only one patient of many. You can, in that case, so if you want to, that would be the place to put in a couple numbers, statistics, or something to show how wide the problem really is. Because now we care about it. Now we have lived it. And now we need to know how prevalent that story really is. Then you can do a piece which says something like, here's how I fit in. So we've gone from one surgery to hundreds of thousands of kids needing surgeries to here's the piece that I do. Here's how I work on that big problem that now you're really paying attention to, right? Which is so much more compelling of a way to say, what do you do for a living and why do you do it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then,
these are all optional again. Then you say something like, my hope is that, like, here's why I really do the work that I do. It's this big problem. Here's the little piece that I serve to work on that problem. This is why I do it. I'm dreaming of a day when, there's one doctor for every 200 children instead, or something like that, right? Share your vision, because now we are all with you and we want to share that vision too. Now, of course, you can imagine the audience is going, how can I help? Right? What can I do? So if you want to have a call to action, this is the place for it. Or if there's anything that you want your audience to do, think, share, etc., this is where you ask them, because they are with you, heart, mind, and soul at this point. So if you care about this, you don't want to get manipulative, but if you share this vision too, here's how I can use your help, or here's how we can use your help, and let's do this together. So what you've done then is take us from this place of great curiosity about how you spend your days to that story piece, which is the centerpiece that helps us connect and relive the experience with you. Everything that comes afterwards, which is a little bit more on the logical, analytical side, we are experiencing as a whole person now, because you opened up those floodgates with that story. And we will stay with you all the way through to the end if you need to ask for us to take some kind of action. Madeline, what are you thinking, or what comments are you getting?
I love this arc you've taken us on, Nancy, and I think that the way that I see this as being so applicable is that first moment with someone, right? And I one that I think we often struggle with is you're out somewhere networking, you're out somewhere in public, and You know, maybe the introvert in you is a little anxious. Believe it or not, I'm a huge introvert. And, you know, that first question gets asked, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
And instead, you know, first, I love that you kicked us off with something different than, well, my company does, or I do X. This is not about my qualifications. This is how I spend my time. This is how I show up and give back to the world. And, you know, I think that there are nuggets here where we can pare down, but I think this is also, I mean, this is the architecture for a speech. This is architecture for if I was doing a give campaign. This is architecture that I could use to share my story online in different ways, whether that's in my website or other ways I show up as a brand. So there's so many nuggets here that are so important. And I think that get us out of that traditional mundane thing of, well, we do the X. This isn't about the services we offer. This is about who we are as people. And I just think that's so, so important. And I had asked folks as you were speaking, you know, how do you spend your days? What's one statement that you could share? And Stacey Coleman wrote in, I spend my days lifting people up. And somebody else shared in and said, that was it, I was going to say. And so I would encourage everyone here, you know, we're shifting to this moment to really ask any other questions that you have of Nancy, and to also share what you're seeing or feeling as you think about crafting your own story based off of this architecture that Nancy has so eloquently given us. So if there's questions that you all have, you know, we would love to hear them. And, you know, one question I have for you, Nancy, just right out the gate is when we think about sharing our stories, particularly online, you know, because it's one thing to share our stories in a room where we can see people, feel people, but we're moving to a much more virtual world, it seems like, at least this week pending.
Yeah.
What are the recommendations you give to people when there's not just that regular layer of discomfort, but this kind of fear that it seems self-promotional? I see a lot of women hesitate to share stories because they worry that it seems like a little bit like egoic or a little bit self-promotional, and they don't like putting themselves out there in that way. So what advice would you offer in that moment?
Right. First, I would offer the point that you're in a whole lot of good company. It's a thing that can be uncomfortable, but that's not where we stop, right? One thing would be to realize that if it makes you uncomfortable, it's probably a really good thing to do for your own growth, to just gravitate toward areas that make you uncomfortable. A second thing that I would probably do is, you know, is do create stories that have to do with other people in your professional world, other people, your clients, for example, or projects that you've worked on. So the story is really about, you're elevating other people, but you're showing your role in it, as the guide. If you know Donald Miller's story brand, you would be the guide. And the other would be maybe test it with a couple friends. See,
Mm.
what do you think? What do you think of this? Another would be create yourself some avatars where, if you don't do this already, create yourself 3 avatars where you go, okay, my typical people that I'm reaching. Okay, there's Mary, she's 37. She works in Portland. She's got 3 kids. She's super busy. What's going to resonate with Mary? What's going to resonate with Tim, who is a tech guy in Houston and, you know, has a master's degree and is very introverted? What's going to work for, so you're writing for real people, even though it feels like you're just like sending it out into the vapor or something. Your voice, your storytelling voice in print, in writing, and also your literal storytelling voice when you're speaking, they really zoom in and get aligned and they're as sharp as they can be when you're imagining, at least, real people, because
Mm-hmm.
we're not wired to tell stories to nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So really write for a very specific audience. I think there was another one, but I'll have to see if I remember the other thing I was going to say.
Okay. Well, while you're remembering that one, Darla wrote in a great question. Can you use this in an interview? Like, can you use this process to get stories out of other people? Which I love this question because sometimes, you know, we've got to get other people to share stories with us. And if so, could you give some examples about how to do that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first thing, when you said interview, I thought you meant a job interview. And of course,
Well, that could be, Darla, feel free to chime in and clarify. This could be a great way to do. I was thinking, because I'm a content brain and I've been doing case study interviews lately. So I was thinking that way, but this is probably what she was meaning, is to use it in an interview as, oh, she wrote in, as a job interview.
Oh, okay, great. So as a job interview, yes. I mean, more and more these days, employers, potential employers, they're going to actually ask you, tell us a story about blah, blah, blah. You actually want to be ready for that. Even if they don't ask you, it might be, what would you say is your greatest strength or something? And you feel kind of weird talking about that. And it's, you feel like it's going to come across as a cliche, which it might.
Mhm.
Just give them a quick job interview. These are quick little stories, right? Because you don't want to quote unquote waste their time. But you just go, oh, the best way to give you a sense of that is, let me tell you a quick story, and that'll illustrate the point that I mean, right? And with a job interview, you might want to make sure the meaning is clear. So you might either want to give the direct answer either at the very beginning and or at the very end. Some other stories you might want to leave for the audience to fill in because it has more impact that way. But in a job interview, you don't want them to interpret it the way you don't want them to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's so important to think about, where are we sharing our stories? How can we be sharing them with consistency as well? Because oftentimes, having sat on the other side of that table as the person conducting the interview, we'll have people who show up and they paint one picture of who they are, and there'll be a different picture on the resume, and then there'll be the person who actually shows up on the job on day one. And I think that in the past, there was this archetype that we had to like show up as someone other than ourselves in order to work in a corporate environment. And I think it's really, really important to get comfortable owning your story, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to work for or with somebody who doesn't accept me as I am. But if I'm not showing them who I am in those critical moments, they're not getting to see it. And storytelling, I think, is a really, really important way to attract and repel. Attract the right people, repel the wrong ones. So can you talk about that a little bit, Nancy, from a brand perspective, why storytelling is so important?
Oh, absolutely. And the alignment that you're talking about. In fact, this is a huge piece that we work with in Next Level, is the alignment of all those pieces, because they have to be consistent. Storytelling as a brand, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So you want to think. Remember when I was talking about when you strategize about the story, you want to take the audience into consideration. You really want to not only think of like the audience that exists or that you think exists, but you want to be very focused on the audience that you actually want. So you're attracting a certain kind of audience. So that's where you create those avatars and say, these are my ideal clients. What problems do they have? Where are they stuck? Where do they feel their pain? How might they run across me? And how do I reach out and connect with them through a story that's really going to resonate with them? I would get You want to be very clear about your personal brand, and that might involve doing some work about what are the most important values that I have, or the most important qualities or superpowers that I have, that I want other people also to see. They have to be real, you have to believe in them, but you also intentionally want people to be, you want to lead with those things. And if you're in an organization, you also want to do that same piece of reflection with the organization. What are the organizations, what are the main elements of their brand, that are real and that are intentional and that you identify with as a person?
Mm-hmm.
And then the story that you create wants to connect the dots, all of those dots: your own personal brand, your own personal values, your company's brand, your company's values. And then you're choosing a story that is in alignment with that. But the way that you share it, the words you use, and if you're delivering it, this way or in person, where you get to use your voice and body language, that all of the nonverbals are also in alignment with that brand.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the piece. I tell people in Next Level and elsewhere that you want to, if three random people met at a coffee shop or a bookstore or a bowling alley or something, and they all just happen to get into conversation about you, Madeline Pratt, like, how do you know her? How do you know her? And they come from very different elements of your professional world, perhaps even your personal world. When they say, the thing about Madeline, she's just, and
Mm.
she's so on it, she's so innovative, and she's so genuine. And the other person from a completely different context in your life says, you nailed it. That's exactly who she is, right? So you want to, everywhere you exist in the world, the real world and the virtual world, you want that brand to line up, to be in alignment with your values and the reality of who you are. And you want your stories to reflect and be in alignment with that brand too.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. Well, I haven't seen any additional questions come in, but I'll keep an eye out. I think with that being said, Nancy, will you tell us a little bit about the next level training that you all have coming up?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are probably in flux at the moment because of the state of everything changing in the world with us right now. We have decided, I think it was this morning, we decided as a group to delay a training in Seattle, which was supposed to be for late April. We don't want to put anybody at risk. We don't want people to worry about, should I register, should I not? So we are working on the final date for Seattle, and that'll be our next training, but we're looking at July, probably the later part of July. And so don't feel hesitant if you already registered. We already are in touch with you if you've already registered. And if you're curious about it, feel free to check in with us and we can give you a sense of, our conversations and how we are adjusting things. And we'll know our new date perhaps even by today. But this Seattle, the training in Seattle, and we'll do one in October in Boise, they are our typical like flagship training where it's a 2-day immersive piece, lovely details. We help people feel really, really comfortable. It's super approachable. And we go through this really deep values work with my colleague, Abby Louie. We go through how to tell your professional story with my colleague, Stacey Ennis. And then I work with people on how to really shape this kind of a story that you share in person, and it really fits your brand too. We go over executive presence, how to use your body, how to feel comfortable in a room when you're networking or when you are offering your story in person, public speaking, basically. And then again, my colleague Laura Tully works us through personal style at the end, so that what you have is, again, those dots all connected between your values, your stories, how they exist everywhere in the world as you've created them, and even how you're showing up visually with your presence and your style. So we just love it, and it's been really, I've just been actually, I've been really surprised at the experiences we've had with women and the connections that they have kept up with us and each other, and the stories they've been sharing about how they go home and process and reflect on the training. And we've had even a few people come back for a second round. So, and they say, wow, it was really good to do this a second time, because life changes, and also to have that power of repetition is great. But anyway, we love it. And we are probably, this is late breaking news, we're probably going to have an online summit version in April when we were going to be doing our Seattle training. So if you're curious about that, definitely you can get in touch and we'll be spreading more info about that.
Awesome. Yeah. And we'll be getting in touch with everyone after this session. We'll be handing out the recording as well. It's just
Yeah.
something that everyone can come back to. And I'm going to say, I'm going to be at this Seattle training. So if you want to come and hang out with me and my team, me and all my director level leadership will be there. And so I would love to see you all ladies in Seattle. It's an honor to get to spend time with you, Nancy, and I'm even more excited to get to do it in person when things settle down. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Nancy, from the bottom of my heart for crafting this beautiful content and sharing it with this audience today. Thank you all for joining. And, just wishing you all a wonderful weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy out there, and reach out if you have any questions, comments, or feedback. It was wonderful getting to spend this morning with you.
Yes, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And I love your engagement, and I can feel all your good energy through your laptops and your phones from around the world. So please have a wonderful day and do take care.
Hmm.
Stay in touch.
All right.